Hello, good evening to everyone, and welcome to today's webinar session organized by Water Forum of Institute of Engineers Sri Lanka, jointly with Institute of Environmental Professionals Sri Lanka and Sri Lanka Association for Advancement of Science, SLAS. And I'm Dr. Samira Samarasekara from University of Sri Jayawardhanapura. I'm representing SLAS Section C. We have selected an interesting topic for today's session, and it will be moderated by Professor Banduni Atapattu at Faculty of Engineering, Open University of Sri Lanka. Now, without further ado, I invite Dr. Kamal Laksiri, former chairman of Water Forum of Institute of Engineers Sri Lanka, to deliver a brief introduction on today's session. And thank you, and over to you, sir.
Okay, I think you can hear me. Good evening to all of you. Let me welcome you all to this second episode of the series of lectures we are going to conduct in this subject. First of all, I would like to thank you for giving me an opportunity to introduce on this new collaborative project to explore the ancient engineering. I think we had one lecture already about a month ago. So this is the second in the series, and you will hear many such interesting lectures in the future, and also experience some practical work happening on this subject of ancient engineering. Now, this is a collaborative work of professionals of several institutions, mainly it's spearheaded by the Water Forum of IESL, along with the Sri Lanka Association of the Advancement of Science, that is SLAS Section C. And then we have National Science Foundation and Institution of Environmental Professionals of Sri Lanka. Currently, those are the institutions involved in this mammoth task, but we expect to expand by incorporating the other relevant bodies. And also we welcome all of you who interested in this subject to join us. If I briefly mention about the objective of our mission here, as many of you have experienced, there are many forums where we discuss or listen about our ancient engineering practices. For example, about Sigiriya, how they pumped water up in the Sigiriya mass, and now recently we heard about Pidurangala, how the Pidurangala had been used as a rainwater harvesting basin. And similarly, ancient heavy constructions such as stoop and other buildings, and then ancient irrigation system. I think today we are going to hear about more about it, and about Bisokotua concept, and then oil flow in at Pahana. So, but still we hear about this in many forums, and we see in publications also, but still so far no adequate or proper scientific approach has been made to analyze those ancient technologies. And also one main item I missed is the how we melt iron ore in Balangoda in Sabaragamu district, Sabaragamu province, where even the swords had been produced and exported to foreign countries according to the records. So there are many such examples of ancient engineering practice, but very only we have records and we hear, but nothing has happened after that. So there are very few cases where an attempt has been made, at least for a scientific approach, to explore this part of our history. And very rarely we find any technical publications in literature review also. So, but we find only collections, recordings, and publishings about the remnants of those ancient systems, mostly from the point of view of archaeologists or historians. Therefore, we consider it as a need of the hour to explore into the technology our ancient engineers practiced in the past in a systematic manner, giving an engineering backing. So I consider it as a must to explore further. So we can, with such an exercise, we also believe it will help the work of the archaeologists and historians. And another objective is to promote the young researchers to extend their research studies to this important area of our history. And also we believe with such research studies, we will be able to document and promote to publish those findings in the international journals. So in this mammoth task, as the Water Forum, our main target is to focus on the water sector. And now in this task, we have identified some of the items to implement in this task. Now, if I list some, the first thing is to establishing a comprehensive water heritage database. And then second, to collect the best practices and publishing bulletins, documents, and preserve in a common platform. And then carrying out research on water archaeology, documentation, conservation, interpretation, and presentation of historical water structures. And then fourth, scientific and educational collaboration with the scientific organizations and academic institutions to conserve the water heritage. And fifth, organizing specialized and international meetings, symposiums, and technical workshops in scientific fields. Sixth, enhancing academic and technical exchange within water heritage and historic water structures academia, cooperating with universities and relevant research organizations to carry out training and academic exchange to conserve water heritage and historic water structures. So these are the tasks we have identified by us, by this group working on it. And similarly, we need to extend this mission to the other sectors as well. I think you can see this not a simple or easy task. It's a mammoth task. And currently, we are also in the process of identifying the tasks as short-term and long-term work plans, so that we can identify the timely manner to implement the various activities, and also to identify other stakeholders to get involved. So this will give you an idea of what we are going to do. And also, we would like to invite all of you who are interested in this task to join us and to share your knowledge, and also for the betterment of this task. So we are also confident that we can achieve our objectives, as we have already gathered a good dynamic professional team with us, as you can see here, and we have a number of organizations. And so we hope to conduct series of presentations like this on different topics while we proceed with the work. So this is a short description about what we are going to do, and I am sure you will like it. And we had a very good participation in our first activity, and this is the second episode. So you will find very interesting future episodes as well. So I kindly request you all to join in this work, and this is something we should do. And I am very sure with the present initiative, this is a good initiative we have made. With that, we can proceed further. So thank you very much. That is the brief introduction about our task. Now let's move to our proceedings of the day. And over to you, Professor Bantuni. Thank you very much. I think you're muted.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Kamal Laksiri, our former chairperson of the Water Forum, and you have explained very clearly that what we are going to do today, and today as well as in future. Thank you very much so much once again. And so I'm moving to introduce our key speaker, Madam Bhadra Kamaladasa, who was the former Director General of Irrigation Department. So let me to read citation of her. Engineer Bhadra Kamaladasa graduated from University of Moratuwa in 1978 in BSc Engineering, Civil Stream, and obtained Master of Development Technologies from University of Melbourne, Australia in 1994. She retired from government service as the Director General of Irrigation in January 2015 after continuous service of 36 years in the Irrigation Department. She has immense experience on planning, designs, construction, operation, rehabilitation, and management of water resources projects and specialized in dam safety. She has published more than 30 technical papers related with water resources development and management. Mrs. Kamala Dasa has represented Sri Lanka in many international forums, sharing Sri Lanka experience in many themes related with dam safety, water resources planning, designs, and operations, management, and rehabilitation. She is nominated as a Sri Lankan representative in 3 technical committees of International Commission of Large Dams and in Dam Safety, Public Awareness and Education and Heritage Committees. And she actively participates in many other international and national professional organizations as technical paper reviewer and advisor. She has presented papers in 3 ICOLD congresses and about 3 symposiums of ICOLD. She is a member of 2 ICOLD technical committees, namely dam safety and so on. She is the author of centenary publication of IESL, Irrigation Development of Sri Lanka, currently working as a freelance consultant on governance, legal matters, feasibility studies, environmental impact assessment, and climate change impact on water resources development and management. So I need not to explain about her because you all know, many irrigation department, we know she's an asset for us actually. So you can see that who she is and the knowledge she has. So now today she's going to share those knowledge with us. Thank you very much, Madam, for presenting us and with us today. Now it's over to you.
Thank you very much, Professor Banduni. Good evening to everyone. Thank you for the kind introduction. Most of you joining today work with modern technology and generally interested to know what is new in the pipeline. So my talk today is on an entirely different subject, on ancient technology, a little known subject, and the purpose is to arouse, as Dr. Kamal Laksiris mentioned, your interest to explore it more. So I will try my best to share my carefully selected facts, which I observed during my career in the irrigation department. So I request to go to the full screen to all the participants if you are interested to see the details of the figures and photographs, as most of them are very old stuff. My presentation will run for an hour, and in the first 10 to 12 minutes, I will briefly explain the current approaches of the water resources engineers in developing and managing the systems, introducing the basics of the development, as the today's audience is very much diversified. So more you become aware of the hardship of the job, you will be amazed, realizing what wonders our ancestors have done 2 or 3 millenniums ago. After introducing some of the amazing features, I will share recent experience in restoration attempt of an ancient system through a case study. Let us first be familiar with the common features of the reservoir and anechoic schemes developed under modern technology. In a reservoir, normally the dam will be earth, concrete, or rock fill. There may be some other varieties as well that will block the water flow of a river to store water. There should be a spillway to pass the excess water during the heavy storms, and also some additional emergency spillways to cater probable high floods. There can be 2 sluices generally serving the lands in right and left bank of the river. Then the water delivery system and irrigable area 2 is a very complicated system having many control and conveyance structures. It is not only the headworks with the dams and other main components. Then in an anechoic scheme 2, the water flow in a river blocked with a relatively small wall that will head up the water in upstream to allow water diversions away from the normal river path. Water so diverted will be taken through a canal to the area to be irrigated through a feeder canal. So many Sri Lankan ancient anicuts were used to convey water to water-short reservoirs. This anicut Ridibendiyala across the Druya was used to take water to Magala Reservoir in Aquaritia through nearly 30-kilometer long canal. In this slide, I will briefly explain the current process of development for you to get an idea. Again, engineering interventions are actually needed throughout the full cycle of the scheme. The process starts with the reconnaissance surveys, which will lead to a pre-feasibility study. If a pre-feasibility study shows positive results, then feasibility studies will be carried out that involves different type of investigations and surveys. A feasibility study may take a minimum of 3 years. Engineers will then start detailed designs based on the recommendations of the feasibility studies. The next step, construction. It is a large dam projects that will take minimum at least 5 years. Even with all modern machinery fleets deployed, that's the time taken, the minimum time. So no need to say that at each step, involvement of highly experienced engineers are necessary, as most of the decisions are to be taken that requires engineering judgments that go beyond the theoretical knowledge. Similarly, institutional capacity is very vital here, having experts with experience, guidelines and specifications, skilled personnel at different levels from labor grade to the specialist, and so on. So after construction, from the first filling of the reservoir itself, constant care is essential, as you can see in the flow chart, for the sustainability of the system. So a well-experienced, centrally controlled organization structure, especially for major, I am concentrating mainly the major irrigation system today, that should be there to coordinate water management, operation, and flood control actions, especially in major schemes. At each step, it is a teamwork. Decisions need to be taken collectively, taking the advice of the subject specialists into account. Each component of the system need to be planned, designed, and constructed considering the long-term sustainability. Especially a high dam is considered as a kind of a time bomb by water resources engineers. If not properly designed, not properly constructed or maintained, there would be a disastrous consequences. This diagram shows possible common failures that can occur in an earth dam that would have been identified by our ancestors. There may be cracks across the bund due to bad quality of material and construction, internal leaks, foundation settlements, leaks through the sluice barrel, damage to the bund due to wave action, slips, and so many others. So I have listed all these for you to realize what expertise ancient engineers would have had to identify these risks and to take necessary preventive or remedial measures. When going through the historical records or inscriptions, we can see how many times our country had faced failures of either single scheme or multiple schemes. Mahavansa has devoted more than 5 pages to list the schemes that were repaired during Great Parakram Bahu around 1100 AC. Those were either failed under natural conditions or destroyed by invaders. 2 examples of such failures in recent past are 1957 floods, which caused failure of 35 major reservoirs, 53 medium reservoirs, and 1,500 village reservoirs just within 3 days. So you can see Kalava breach in the left-hand corner photo when the Kalava was breached. One other incident is Kantale Dam failure that occurred in 1986 that took lives of 130 people who were living downstream. So more than any other civil engineering structure, dam need a special care during construction, operation, and maintenance. That is a must. Let us now see the development phases of irrigation systems in Sri Lanka. I can identify 3 distinct phases. First reference to a Weber in Mahavansa is during Prince Anuradha, that is in 6th century BC, while the last reference on new irrigation works is during Great Parakram Bahu, whose reign ended in 1186 AC. Development from a single reservoir up to much complicated transbasin diversions are recorded in many of our chronicles. Then the civilization in the dry zone disappeared due to unknown reason, leaving a meager population in dry zone, not only in Rajarata, but in Ruhunrata too. Majority migrate into wet zone. It is a completely dark era from 12th century to 17th century, during which no irrigation development had taken place except few small schemes in wet zone. After 17th century, initiatives were there for revival of ancient systems, which was very, very slow at the beginning, but picked up very fast from after 1860s and again after Second World War II. So I like to label these three eras as ancient, dark, and contemporary in my presentation. Common belief is that first reservoir in Sri Lanka is identified with certainty is Abbewawa, constructed during King Pandukabaya in 6th century BC in Anuradhapura. While Henry Parker suggested it is Pandawawa in Panduvasnora. Let the archaeologist resolve that puzzle anyway. However, building up a reservoir of this nature cannot be a sudden invention, but definitely it would have been a gradual technical development taking place maybe for many centuries. I tried to collect the information from various authentic documents over development of reservoirs, aqueducts, and transbasin canals until end of 12th century AC, and ended up by plotting those in a map of Sri Lanka. The outcome is this. It is interesting to see how the current dry zone and intermediate zone of the country were dotted with so many schemes. From 12th century, that is King Parakrambrahu II onwards, it is considered a dark era, as I said earlier, in the country, not only in the angle of water resources, but in general. No major structure, even a dagaba, had not been constructed. Our history records cannot provide us any clue on what has happened to physical infrastructure developed with very high expertise and what happened to the knowledge base, especially. I'm talking about the knowledge base that was there in the community, in the engineering fraternity base, gathered by constructing and managing such a huge system. So from 12th century onwards, AC, we take a jump to 17th century to see what has happened during the contemporary era. During the Dutch era, Dutch period, there were few engineers employed by the East India Company who had done surveys and for restoration of ancient irrigation works such as Kantale and Giant's Tank in Mannar. Then they did some new constructions such as Urubokka Dam and waterways along the southwestern coastal belt that made some impacts on the wet zone agriculture. Next came the British colonial rulers. They started governing us from late 18th century. It is recorded that there were some purposeful destructions done by them to the remaining irrigation system, especially in Vellassa, as a revenge for the revolt in 1818. However, after facing the second rebellion, British rulers realized that the only way to keep the inhabitants occupied is providing them water for their traditional livelihood, agriculture, and that is the only way to escape. So they started revival of ancient system as usual, starting from enacting legislations, and then village tank restoration was started from mid 1850s by providing sluices while earthwork was done by the occupants. Intended beneficiaries on Sramadana and bearing any associated cost by the farmers themselves. And restoration of the large scheme started after gaining experience in small reservoirs in during that period in 1870s, of course. Then let us see how revival of ancient systems was launched. For restoration of any work, the first thing the engineer would look upon will be the as-built drawings or at least a layout diagram of the scheme. There was no such record available except some chronicles such as Deepavansa, Mahavansa, etc., which narrated the names of the kings who constructed or repaired the schemes, but without any further details. Inscriptions were found close to some of the reservoirs in which some water management rules were written, but nothing about the technical stuff. When searching any ancient plans in National Museum and National Archives, I could find only this map on Alahara. You can see in the right-hand corner. That is believed to be drawn in 17th century. It is said that interest digging out the history of Sri Lanka was a result of translation of Mahavansa into English in 1836. And it was a passion for many high-ranking officials from governor downwards to visit the ancient irrigation systems and collect historical, social, and technical information of the schemes, which remains as valuable records to date. You can find their handwritten notes at the National Archives. These have now become archaeological artifacts by now. Actually, the extensiveness and the variety of schemes was identified only after completion of the topographical maps of the whole country in 1900 by the survey department. This topo sheet covers 1,000 square kilometers of area and shows nearly 1,200. You can see the extensiveness of medium and small reservoirs. Until then, no one had a clear idea on the irrigation infrastructure of the country possessed. These maps have given a very elaborative view of many abundant village level and significant number of large schemes that spread across the landscape. Physical components remaining were the only evidence that could be made use of restoring the ancient tanks and canals for the engineers. I just want to share these photos from the Irrigation Department archives taken in 1950s and 1960s when the feasibility surveys had been done in Hurugulawa and Wahakada reservoirs. The photo in the right-hand bottom shows just after Hurugulawa Dam was restored. You can see clearly the thick jungle that existed in the reservoir bed. And you can imagine what would have happened in the 5 centuries, the dark era I was mentioning, since the dry zone was abandoned. So sometimes when we go into the deep jungle as to do the surveys, to find out the remains of the reservoir, we cannot sometimes differentiate the dam with the natural hillock, both of which are covered heavily by the heavy grown trees. So the contemporary era continued under British rulers, and in 1930s, some changes in management could be observed. D.S. Senanayake became the Agriculture and Irrigation Minister, and he spearheaded many brand new schemes with massive settlement plans. Restoration of village level reservoirs were continuing, and you can see in the map showing the annual work plan of the Irrigation Department in 1940s, province-wise basis, it mentions that 2,900 village reservoirs were restored by that time, while 1,740 were under repairs. And heavy machinery, I need to mention that heavy machinery was introduced for the construction only for the first time in 1940s. That helped a lot in acceleration of the restoration program. Then Ceylonese era continuing with the planning of brand new reservoirs in Galloya, Udawalawa and Mahaveli basins. Those were mooted during that period. If I do not mention about how the currently used design standards for irrigation development in Sri Lanka had evolved, this story will not complete. Many of you would have referred or heard about Henry Parker's record of ancient irrigation technology in Sri Lanka. He was an irrigation engineer who had worked here for 2 decades. Likewise, there are many scholarly articles written by engineers and surveyors who had taken interest in understanding the ancient Sri Lankan technology. One significant intervention I want to mention here was by engineer J.S. Kennedy, Director of Irrigation, who submitted a landmark technical paper to Institution of Engineers in 1930. This was after a thorough study conducted on village irrigation work, especially interpreting the technical, social, and environmental aspects of ancient systems, blending with modern scientific theories. This study was done after a dam disaster happened in 1923 in Madavachia, when a train got caught to a flood, killing 20 commuters. The engineers inspected all the minor SOS that may endanger the railway lines or run in railway from Polgahavela to Jaffna and Polgahavela to Mana. The above technical paper was based on the study. So all the design standards for and operation rules adopted by the irrigation engineers at later stages and continuing still were developed based on the design principles introduced in this paper that clearly explain the design aspects of village reservoirs, especially. Yet the theories could be extended to major and large schemes too. With this background, Sri Lankan engineers could add more than 50 number of new reservoirs in addition to the restoration of ancient schemes. We proudly achieved self-sufficiency of rice because of these interventions, I must say. Then restoration of ancient infrastructure continued with all these new developments. Planning and design team had to decide whether the same ancient infrastructure could be used or else had to be modified or combined together with the new components. The decision is based on the investigation results done over the remnants. Let me explain this in a slide later, but basically there had been two situations. In one, restoration of same components had been attended, and in the other alternative is the other type is the alternative sites have been adopted. In many instances, the same earth dam and sluice had been repaired and treated, and even same location of the ancient spillway had been adapted for the new spill. Major reservoirs like Kantale, if I can continue the names, but few of them, Kantale, Kalavawa, Nachaduwa, Huruluwa, Parakama Samudra, Tisavawa, Namurawa, those are the places where the same infrastructure was used as it was. In contrary to this, there had been some ancient abandoned system that could not be revived as it is due to the bad condition or dilapidated condition of the remaining parts. The remnant, very good example I can quote here is the remnant of ancient dam in Rambakanoya. That was the new Rambakanoya reservoir commissioned only 5 years back. When the standard quality testing was done in the ancient dam, irrigation department found that the remaining section of the bund cannot be used. Even with the modern embankment treatment methods, we found that it cannot be revived. So irrigation department decided to go for a new dam upstream of the same location. You can see in the picture at the top, a new dam that had been constructed just upstream of the old dam. The other photograph down shows the section of riprap, ancient riprap, old dam, and the section of unfinished sluice. Let me now share some amazing technological features our investigation teams had come across during the restoration processes. I selected following features only for today's presentation out of a long list. If we study the ancient systems, we can observe countless varieties of designs adopted by ancient engineers. You cannot find them in modern irrigation engineering books, in which conventional stereotype designs are quoted. Let me show some of the selected examples that show the diversity. Okay, these will be the highlights I will be discussing later on. So the type 1 variety I selected is the this single small reservoir. Many of you are familiar with this illustration that shows a single village reservoir and the associated other structures. Scholars have identified that Weber is not just a single entity, but consists of many other features that had been incorporated to ensure its sustainability. The social and environmental fabric is closely knitted to the system. The next variety in our ancient system is a cascade system, which was declared recently as a UNESCO heritage. There are over 150 cascade systems identified so far. A careful study will reveal that it is a perfect system to address climate change impacts. Another variety you can find is barrages. In local terms, we call it anicuttes, especially across major rivers. This is Tekkam anicut. Many of you would have seen this and visited the place. That is across Malwatoya. Its origin goes back to 5th century AC, and subsequent repairs also are mentioned in the chronicles. Construction of an anicut across a bigger river like Malwatoya is a real challenge to the engineers even now, with all modern technology available for handling continuous flow in the river. During heavy storms, the river brings more than, this Malwatoya river will bring more than 7,000 meter cube per second water that will create a huge hydraulic force. The large stone blocks used with some amazing interlocking arrangements, and also the glues filled with some indigenous mortar made out of sand, lime, and bee honey, and some wood resins were strong enough for centuries to act against the nature. During the restoration in early 1900, British engineers had to fix only few dislocated boulders here. So for me, this is an amazing structure. It remains intact after so many centuries, stood against countless number of flood events, and so on. Many questions come to my mind when I go there. Where are the stability and geometrical feature design notes of the structure? How did the engineers divert flow of these large rivers during construction, while we now do it by constructing by bypass tunnel and so on? I couldn't think of any answer yet. The type 4 variety I selected is Padaviya Weber to represent a single large reservoir that has its own unique features. Was fitted to the topography. Padavi Reservoir has only one sluice, and it releases water not to the main canal but into the main river again. Then Pickup Panican in downstream distributes water to the irrigation system. This is again unusual design one cannot find in a theory book. When the British engineers were conducting surveys in 1880 to restore Padavi Weber, they could not understand the design concept of the system. Engineer Henry Parker again, who did the surveys in 1889, mentioned in his notes, quote, "We may not be able to put this into a known design model now, but the long experience the Sinhala engineers had over thousands of years would not have done a mistake. It will take some time for us to realize the concept behind this," unquote. It was true. When irrigation department did fresh surveys in 1940s again, they found the design concept and could restore the same ancient system again. Another variety, actually the Padavi was believed to be constructed during King Moggallana. I missed that. Another variety is this peculiar system, possibly one can find only in Sri Lanka, to my knowledge. Giant's Tank in Mannar. That it is located in a small drainage basin adjacent to Malwatoya river basin. What happens here is the reservoir gets filled up through the feeder canal from Tekkam Anicut, which I showed earlier. There are nearly 162 small shallow reservoirs in the irrigable area, and these will be filled by 10 main canals in Maha season to cultivate nearly 30,000 acres. During the Yala season, when the continuous water flow from Malwatua is not assured, the small reservoir beds are converted to paddy fields and cultivation being done in limited acreage by direct issues from the main reservoir. The same ancient irrigation practice being continued after restoration of the system in 1900. I cannot think of a better alternative to suit this topography, and also especially in Mana area, the hydrometeorological conditions, with the engineering theories I learned as undergraduate in engineering. And so the sixth variety I selected is a reservoir constructed not across the main river as done in conventional designs, but across a tributary running parallel to the river. The Rugam reservoir will get water from the catchment of a small tributary from the diversion main river through the Anicut. You can see the dam has been constructed parallel to the river. Then the water is released to the sluice again to the main river to reach the irrigable area that is located about 20 kilometers away from the reservoir. There are so many ancient dams constructed adopting this concept, though not covered in contemporary textbooks. That type of many reservoirs can be seen having dams parallel to the river path. Then one other type we can admire is large irrigation schemes such as Kalavava, Parakrama Samudra, which are made by combining many reservoirs. These large systems are not a single short construction, but evolved through centuries. According to the historical records, Balaluyava has been constructed in 1st century BC, while Kalavava during 5th century AD. One need to have an amazing knowledge of surveying for aligning these two dams in different tributaries finally to make a single large reservoir. The next variety is the trans-basin diversion, which I can define as the pinnacle of the ancient irrigation technological innovations. Imagine water transferring from one basin to another through 87-kilometer long canal under gravity flow. So with so much precise survey instruments nowadays, inputs of several experienced experts are needed to lay out such a canal. It cannot be one man's job. Several people working together for few months, just for the survey works only. No need to say about the construction. I cannot think about the time taken for construction with manual methods without having heavy machinery like today. So how they have done, it is still a mystery. The next amazing feature in ancient technology is the selection of suitable sites for dams, sluices, and spills. Ancient engineers had selected the most suitable sites to locate the dam, sluice, and spill. One should not need to judge whether the downstream of the spillway is capable of absorbing the giant force created by spill discharge. In many large schemes, the selected spill site is a sound rock outcrop that prevents covering. This is the site selected for spillway of Nachadura Reservoir by ancient engineers, which is the perfect location, which has been again selected by the modern engineers. Out of thousands of other examples, I selected the following amazing feature in selecting the suitable sites. This shows how ancient engineers selected most appropriate type of development to suit the topography. You can see the left bank of Mahavali after Minipe had been developed to feed the low-lying irrigable area through the Minipe Canal. While in the right bank, a series of reservoirs had been constructed. Modern water resources engineers having access to aerial photographs and topographical maps would have selected the same locations, same type of schemes for this topography. I cannot imagine how one can decide most suitable choice to suit the topography and the locations of Anicuts and the dam without having facilities to see the bird's eye view during that time. Then the next feature is sluice or Biseau-Couture used to control, release the water from a reservoir. That is another marvel you can find in ancient systems. A lot of discussions, a lot of papers are there explaining this one. So British engineers had recorded that they found valve pits, as these were called in 19th century, that were available only in Sri Lanka, and suggest that it is one of the crucial factor contributed for success of ancient systems in Sri Lanka. Here again, it is not a typical uniform sluices you can find in ancient system, but vast number of varieties specially designed to suit the ground condition. Conventionally, sluice is located in the main dam in our current designs. But in this ancient Wakaneri scheme, the sluice is located in a saddle dam, which is ideal place to serve the irrigable area. No need to have a thorough expertise for, I mean, the one has to have a very thorough knowledge, expertise knowledge to select such a location. This is the famous Soroborava sluice carved through the natural rock. I wonder any modern engineer would have got such an imagination to conceptualize the sluice so precisely to match the natural features. There are so many unrestored ancient sluices that we can do research around and find out the amazing technology behind same. Slope protection is another amazing feature we can observe in many ancient reservoirs. One can find ancient preprep still intact, serving as wave absorbers, still serving in Girtale, Nachaduwa, Kalawava, and many other ancient systems that restored during last century. So I will go into more details of this feature in my case study without explaining it here. And the planning and design of effective flood management measure in the reservoirs is the most critical challenge, I must say, the water engineers face. So design of a spillway with radial gate source with some other suitable arrangement and reanalysis the adequacy of the spillway periodically are the general norms nowadays. The most common engineering principles applied in current practice is preventing overtopping the embankment by providing many safety factors in the design, provision of spillways or else control of inflow to the reservoir. So those are the measures we take now. Water management during floods and during the drought, in both extreme cases in a reservoir, no need to say there, it needs different type of skills which must have been mastered by our ancient engineers. So let us see some technical solutions provided by them few millenniums ago for flood control. As explained earlier, to this in Rugam reservoir, as an example, many large reservoirs experiencing frequent heavy floods are located away from the main river. Parakram Samudra, which comprises of 7 reservoirs, is located away from Ambanganga. The water is diverted. This is Ambanganga flowing. Water is diverted from an anicut constructed at Angamadilla through a feeder canal. That is how water shortage was addressed in a novel way. You can see the gates at Angamadilla can be closed during the floods if Parakram Samudra is already full. Then the flood water in Ambanganga will not be a burden to the reservoir, but during the water shortage period, definitely this is the best arrangement to fill the reservoir. One other unique structural feature in construction of a large anicut was to locate the anicut in oblique angle. You can see in this diagram, the Angamadilla anicut is, located in a oblique angle to the flow. and giant hydraulic force will not disturb the structural stability. It is one of the best examples to illustrate this phenomenon. The last technological feature in my list is the transbasin diversions. I need to emphasize it as the highest achievement again by our ancestors. This is considered as the most effective climate resilience measure in the water sector in the current context. Not only planning, designs, and construction of such a complicated system is a challenge, but post-construction water management too, which is now being done under hydrology models and with the participation of all stakeholders, that is a real challenge. So we are yet to explore the management models the ancient kings had adopted. Now I selected the Kudavilachchi reservoir scheme to present as a case study today. This is an abundant scheme in mid of Vilpattu National Park. Urumale area, most of the historians know it is close to Vilpattu and is one of the earliest settlements in Sri Lanka. So archaeologists believe that Kudavilachchi would have been constructed to serve the urban water needs as well as the agricultural purposes of the area. Irrigation department constructed feasibility studies recently to restore it and now attending to the preliminary site preparation work for construction. According to the current regulation, approval of archaeological department is a must, where conditions would be imposed to preserve the artifacts and so on. Special features observed by both engineers and archaeologists during the investigations are highlighted in many reports produced by these two organizations. In these two maps, you can see the locations of Mahavilachchi, which is now, this is Mahavilachchi, which has been restored in 1950s, and this is Kudavilachchi in the mid of Vilpattu National Park. So there are several guesses for its origin during the going back to the King Vasabha and Prince Saliya. Hope archaeologists will resolve this based on their future investigations anyway. This Google map shows the main components of abandoned headworks in thick jungle. Length of the bund is more than 2.5 kilometers. There are 7 breaches along the bund, showing the signs of overtopping the bund during the flood. The reservoir would have been destroyed during a flood. Remnants of 2 sluices and a spillway could be found with a special feature at the spill that looks similar to a platform. In general, cross-section of the dam is taken. We can find 2 sluices having constructed at 2 levels, maybe to serve plot of area, irrigable area at 2 different levels. So as shown in this layout map, here the proposed earth dam will be constructed, that is shown in red line. It will be constructed in the upstream of the existing dam. Existing dam is the yellow, this line. Engineering judgments is that restoration of ancient dam is not suitable due to many reasons, and also like again in Ramakanoya, and also recommendation of archaeology department has been to conserve the ancient dam and ancient Visokotua. So these photographs shows the remnant of one sluice and Visokotua. It has been destroyed recently by treasure hunters once the irrigation department and archaeology department started investigations. The brick masonry provides a foolproof cover. You can see the brick masonry in one sluice structure. It is a foolproof cover to the sluice to prevent any leakages through the structure. This is inside view of the sluice barrel that is made using 8 feet long stone slabs. Until recently, this was a shelter for a bear family, a mother and 2 cubs, and the irrigation survey teams had very tough time, I know, working with them while doing the surveys. The platform I mentioned earlier, there's a legend saying this space was used by Prince Salier and Asokamala to spend their leisure time enjoying the beauty of the reservoir. While archaeologists believe that it would have been a place used by king to hold his legislative council meetings, and engineers believe it as an emergency spillway or part of the operation room of the headworks. So some photos of the remaining section of the spillway is given here, just to your interest. Nearly after 2 millenniums, the riprap is still in contact. It is survived as it was done in as like in recent past. So riprap appears at 2 levels, which is very uncommon. As you can see in this cross-sectional drawing. There are many technical interpretations for that, for having 2 levels. If you go into the finer details, the riprap, you can see that nearly cut boulders have been placed very carefully with a lap length of about 300 millimeters. I cannot imagine how long they have taken to prepare these dress stones nearly for 2.5 kilometer long embankment and placing them carefully in this manner. Okay, let us put these matters for more investigations, more explorations. Then there were 2 inscriptions at the spill, of which copies have been taken by the archaeology officials of the archaeology department. It is yet to be read, and long one seems to be displaying some regulations over management of the reservoir. Reports produced by the irrigation department and archaeology department have highlighted so many interesting observations. I'm not going into the details of these things at this moment, since I have taken a lot of time by now. So I'm sure many research opportunities are there for the academics and also the practitioners to go into more details. I like to conclude my presentation with this slide. This is a photograph I collected from annual report of the Director of Archaeology, produced in 1901. This photograph was titled as Pokuna Sea at Tisavava. It would have been meant for bathing purposes. As I can see, there are no irrigation releases as such. So when I showed it to my daughter, she has put it in a 3D view like this. I'm sure the new generation will regenerate our water heritage in this manner to expose our ancient water heritage to international community. This should help in promoting tourism, I strongly believe. This is only a very minute part of amazing features and mysteries of ancient Sri Lankan water engineering. There is a huge section yet to explore, part of this iceberg, I must say. And with the modern technological tools, it will not be a challenge for future generations. Finally, I want to thank the organizing committee for inviting me to this presentation. I appreciate Dr. Kamal Laksiri's commitment here, who initiated this joint activity over this little known subject. Thank you all for listening. Professor Banduni, I hand over the podium to you to conduct the Q&A session.
Thank you very much, madam. It's actually even for me that the time has passed, but I didn't notice it at all. So thank you very much for your excellent, informative, and inspiring presentation. We all know that there is no person who having such a extraordinary knowledge on mysteries of irrigation other than you. So it was a great pleasure that you are with us, and thank you so much. And now we are moving to the Q&A session. So anybody who has questions, you can you can type in the chat session. And I'd like that if you have any questions, then we can go ahead. And Okay, so Madam, that I have a few questions to initiate the, let's say, our discussion. So may I ask something like that? Is it only in Sri Lanka the ancient water heritage existed?
Okay. Professor Bandhuri, actually diversions, storing and management of water had taken place in many countries, not only in Sri Lanka. Especially in Asian and Mediterranean and South Asian, South American countries, while going through the World Dam Register, one can find that was prepared by International Commission of Large Dams. One can find many ancient dams and diversions still in operation in Japan, in China, and many other countries. India, Pakistan, Jordan, Iran, Egypt, Turkey, and so on. For example, Mesopotamia, currently Jordan, remnants of 3 masonry dams have found that constructed maybe in 3000 BC. In South India during Chandragupta, that is in 350 BC, if I am correctly remembered, there had been a reservoir serving irrigation and domestic water. So likewise, there are many archaeological findings you can find in literature and also in internet. You can find a lot of information. Of course, most of these exploration works have started in late 20th century. So in brief, we are not the only inventor. There are so many other countries. They had their own way of water management infrastructure to suit the geographical conditions where the advanced technology had been used. So the puzzle is the archaeologists still unable to explain why there are no authentic records. That is what we are still talking about. Okay, that is my small answer. Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam. So I think end of this Q&A session that we will have a small discussion regarding that what we are going to do with IESL, SLAS, NSF, as well as IEPSL, and as well as with all of you. So before moving to that, now it's a Q&A session. And my next question is, Madam, so why the irrigation engineers did not preserve the ancient systems in their original conditions? You know that we know about the Yogodala and see that sometimes knowing that they have done some damages to Yogodala when we are doing our Mahavali systems. So anyway, that probably unknowing. And so can you answer for that question? Okay. I hope that I'm not putting in no trouble.
Yeah, Professor Anthony, actually, I can answer it. It may be a bit of a long answer anyway. Now, we must realize the ancient irrigation schemes are not the artifacts similar to Dagada or monasteries or place like Sigiriya, right? But these are living structures still serving the community. Continuing to serve the community. So actually we had some discussions with the archaeological department and irrigation department, how we can make that declared as heritage, and found that there may be a lot of repercussions if we declare, because archaeological act is a very strong one that prevent any action to be taken over these structures by any other organization. So irrigation department or Mahavali or any other organization will not be able to do any conservation measures or operation and maintenance. Likewise, so there are so many issues like that. Anyway, we will come to that later. So when the restoration been done, engineers' main concern is providing proper safety condition and mechanism for water management. If I actually, I do not agree at all that allegations leveled against those who spent their lifetime in restoring the ancient systems. I think one should realize the context under which the engineers, surveyors, and technicians entered the jungle to find out the details of the scheme that were totally abandoned. For example, when Henry Parker was attending the surveys of Padavia in late, as I mentioned in my presentation, in late 1880s, the area was in thick jungle. There was no one there to show the remnants of even to tell the at least the legendaries. So the priority of the government was to restore the systems and for agriculture and bring the self-sufficiency status of the country. Similar to the situation that environmental concerns came into the attention of the regulations to become the regulations in 1980s. The archaeological assessments also was introduced very recently. Until then, it was like a dark area for the engineering fraternity. That I must say. So that is now very good example. The Kuda village case study I explained you. We both organizations work together and actually took. I mean, now the initial studies are being continued now more than 8 years now. So was there a provision to spend so much time is one question. So if you study carefully the drawings and maps of ancient systems and compare with the restored systems, it may be very few changes that would have been made. You would have noticed that in my presentation, how the ancient systems were, especially the manna in the giant tank and small tank system in downstream of Mana have been restored. I mean, the Public Works Department and Survey Department, Irrigation Department annual reports, if you go through, and you will recall how many officers and laborers were the victims of many deadly diseases, like especially Parangi, malaria, and many other things. So likewise, there are many, I must say that there are many other abandoned large schemes still in laying condition, untouched in many areas. So there are a lot of ample opportunities for the universities and other people to conduct the research and make them showcase cases. I hope
Okay, thank
I
you.
answered again. Yeah.
Yeah, actually a bit long answer, but I think that is very, you have clearly explained that what it is. And now I'd like to ask the audience question, that is Mr. Mihal Kure, engineer probably from Australia, that he was, last time also he was with us. And he asked that first question, how such a large quantity of materials such as bees, honey was obtained? So, probably. And here's another question at the same as, are there any records of the plumbing technology and plumbing skills?
To both the questions, I must say I have no answers actually. I mean, it's very still those areas are yet to explore. We don't know from where those materials were obtained, and the details of the plumbing, surveying, and all these not only plumbing actually. I'm amazed with the geotechnical investigation that would have gone into the preliminary investigation. So things like that are still yet to explore.
Yeah, and all are mysteries like our title, and probably they, not only that, there are many questions like how such a big rubbles move into that places and all those things, and also that probably they may have another way to find out that, to have the okay, bees, honey, and all those things. And we know about the Ruan Melissa and all those things, and those are really mystery and also interesting, as well as the that's our ancient heritage. Okay, so otherwise I can say the engineering heritage, let's say. So I'd like to move another question. There are two hands up also. Okay, may I give a chance to them? That I hope that you will ask questions without taking much time, Mr. Sri Pereira, Mr. Dr. Professor, I don't know. So you can ask your question. So, is it okay? I'm not sure whether our control, the ISL office has control. Or I'm asking unmute, but they are unable to talk probably. They are not in the position to. Yeah, Mr. Pratapa, please.
Yes, so thank you very much. It's a very inspiring address. I want to ask two questions, but the other one has been answered. It's about the Yodala. My other question is, isn't there a record of Sri Lankans putting up a dam in South India? The speaker is aware of such.
No, actually, I haven't come across such a record. Actually, there are a lot of, talks. I mean, I can remember one Japanese professor when came here for a presentation. He mentioned that in their historical records, or I don't know whether they believe that Sri Lankan engineers had come there in 1 or 2 million years back to give apart their knowledge, technology in construction of dams. Likewise, Turkey. In Turkey also, they have some belief that Sri Lankan engineers help them in constructing dams. But I haven't come across any authentic record so far over these matters.
Mr. Pratapa, your chance now.
Okay, thank you very much, Bhadra. I'm Ravindra here from Sydney. Yeah, you took our memory back long way. I mean, I met both of you, Kamaladas and you, in my second year at Katuvadda. I came from Peradeniya for a long story. But my question is, I learned from Dennis Fernando, late Mr. Dennis Fernando, that technology came from Middle East to Sri Lanka, and we had far more sophisticated irrigation designs than neighbor Indians. Is that your understanding too?
Again, actually, of this historical, I must say it is some sort of belief, because in the historical records, I haven't seen such, comments or notes or things like that, because normally the authentic records are only be considered as to be taken up. I mean, otherwise now there are a lot of talks and a lot of myths around the systems, which we cannot put into our records. No, so that is my answer in short. No, I haven't come across.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Ravindra, thank you, Ravindra, for joining us from Melbourne or Australia.
Yeah, thank you. And also, I have seen that many all over the world that there are many engineers that Sri Lankans join with us. And thank you very much for your time. And at the same time that I'm asking the next question from our probably Sachitra Veragoda. Is that you, Sachitra? That he's telling that I'm wondering all the way about the storage of water expected those all days. Sachitra, are you there? Probably Dr. Bay. I think that is Dr. Veragoda. If not that, okay, is that because of long drought spells or demand due to large population? So his question is why we have storage such a lot of water.
Yeah, I must say actually now all these schemes were not. I believe. I mean, not me only, but most of the historians I have read. Those schemes are not in existence at a particular, I mean, at the same time. For example, during Polonnaruwa period, the systems in Polonnaruwa would have been existed. And in likewise in Anuradhapura period, only Anuradhapura and maybe in in Kurunegala and also some southern areas, those would have been. So not like in current era, all these schemes are not in existence in parallel. So that was the interpretation of the historians as far as I know, according to the records I have read.
Okay, thank you, madam. And the next question posted is like telling that just we have forgot to mention about the Mahavali Development Program, where we made a lot of ancient irrigation structures. So I'd like to answer for that our participant that we are in future we are coming with that also. Probably our next speaker would be in our series of these lectures, Mr. Arup Pala from Mahavali Development Authority. He will come to you with the title of Ancient Irrigation in Sri Lanka and Modern Dam Monitoring. So in that case, probably he will address that the part what you are saying, and please be with us in our next series also. So if I'm moving to our chat area for other questions, let's see here that probably Professor Chandana, I think he was last time also he was with us. Professor Chandana, do you have something to talk? What he's saying, actually there are many monuments, so whatever the artifacts we have in this archaeological department, but they don't have much money and funding sources that if those are available, then we can work some more and dig some more things. That's what he is mentioning probably. And right, and if we are moving forward, that any other questions? Okay.
Yeah, Bandhani, I can see. Sorry, I can see someone has asked about desilting.
Yes, madam.
Tisaveva.
Right. Oh, yeah, madam. Could you please? Yeah, please answer for that. The question is, could you please give some comments about the Tisaveva, which is in the news what is it? Desilted by Chinese army.
Yeah, actually, I am not going to touch about the Tisaveva or Chinese army to answer that. But generally, I like to comment about desilting because it is again a bit of a long answer because it's a current subject that is being widely discussed. So as usual, there are pros and cons on desilting, and we have to look at the issue in many angles: social, environmental, economical, and also in some cases in archaeological angles. It is very common request for the irrigation engineers that is coming from the farming community and also from the inland fishermen to desil the reservoir to enhance the storage, at least to bring the capacity to the original storage. So, of course, as the river flow, we block the river flow with a dam, the sediment load that would have flowed down to the sea is retained there. No? So silting up of a reservoir is a natural phenomenon. So if someone asks an irrigation India 2 decades back, I must say, whether they are ready to desilt a reservoir, answer would have been definitely big no. No, irrigation department did not encourage desilting of reservoirs. The reason is the cost of desilting that cannot be justifiable to the benefit that one would gain in terms of additional capacity. So if you remove, okay, I'm not going into the detailed calculations. If I can remember, in 2012, government provided the irrigation department and Mahavali Authority nearly 600 million rupees for desilting of reservoirs. So that is during an extremely drought period, and it was a very difficult task finding the places for disposal of the silt material. No one wanted the silt as the filling materials in their lands, as these deposits are supposed to contain a lot of heavy metals. So transporting the removed material far away and dumping in no man's land, it was a difficult task. So silt is rich. We know that silt is rich with sand, clay, and organic matter. So if carefully separated these, those will be reused without wasting. So our aim should be to make use of this material for other development work. Then there is a concern whether removal of silt will make any harm to the reservoir. That is the main question asking from the engineers. Yes, if done in haphazard manner, it will end up as a disaster. So, but now we have the modern technology like bathymetric surveys that could assess how much silt is available and where it is available and so on. So it is now needed to have proper regulatory measures and close supervision and monitoring to desilting process to measure the desilting depth and all that. So there were no proper guidelines, actually, I must say, in the organizations to implement this. But the guidelines are now under preparation, considering all these aspects. That is the answer I can give. I am sure a lot of people would have had in this mind in this question when talking about the ancient irrigation.
Thank you, Madam.
Kandari.
And the next question is from Lokana, our participant Lokana Kollure. And he's asking, do you use modern engineering simulation methods in the investigation of these ancient technologies? For example, CFD, FEA, and those things.
In many cases, yes, I must say. Can you repeat that? Section?
Any modern technologies like CFD? What do you mean by CFD? He mentioned CFD or FEA. What is if Lokana, Mr. Lokan, if you are here?
Do you use modern engineering simulation methods in the investigation of ancient technology? Lochana. No, actually I have to get this abbreviations clear. I am not familiar with this one. Sorry about that.
But anyways, the simulation technologies are there. I don't know whether you are talking about. We have to. That's what actually our effort. With this series later on, that we are going to have a big, let's say, community with engineers as well as, let's say, the university staff as well as our students, that we want to explore those things, and we have to reserve those things. I think that the Madam Kamalidasa wanted those, and when we were beginning this discussion, that we were trying to get to be together and explore what we had in our ancient times. What are the mysteries? So we can't, like a small group of us, we can't do it alone. So we want your support as well as our young minds, that our small, let's say, first year or the second year university students' thoughts or the minds. So therefore, that we are planning to have a big exploration in our ancient things, not only the water heritage, but moving to other things also. So that's our final target. So IESL is targeting for that. And with that small note,
sorry,
yes, Madam.
I must disturb here for a while.
Yeah, Madam, please. Yes.
I think the two engineers have mentioned that FEA is finite element analysis and finite element modeling. So yes, of course, we are using those modeling for various hydrological analysis. We are using it.
There are many, not only the final element analysis, many packages, no, Madam, that there are many packages as well as simulation things, and so many things we can have with now also some engineers, they use those things. So yeah, of course, the simulation will help us in future. Yes, I can see that our Professor Chandana is handing hands up. Professor Chandana, where are you? Can you talk now? Professor Chandana? Professor Chandana, no, he's maybe yes. I have seen him, and there's somebody with no name, Odulit. Dulit, okay, you can ask your question now. So Dulit, yes, please go ahead. Yep, I don't know, maybe, no, he's not going to ask any question. Professor Chandana, do you like to share your thoughts with us?
Banduni, I can see Mr. Nikapiti, Engineer Nikapiti has mentioned,
Yes.
answering the question that sharing of knowledge with other countries. Raja Tarangarangani has mentioned about our ancient engineers have done some reservoirs in overseas. Yeah, thank you very much for that reply. Actually, I have not referred that. I must go into that details. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you that you mentioned about the CFD, computational fluid dynamics. Okay, CFD, the MCCS. Right, any other questions from the audience? Okay, if there are no questions.
Professor Chandana has asked to unmute him. And also one Mr. Susanta Gunatilaka has asked whether he can ask the question.
Dr. Susanta, where are you? Dr. Susanta Gunatilaka probably. Yes, I have seen him. Yeah, Dr. Susanta, yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, both from Section C and also from the Asiatic Society. Madam, I think you remember I invited you for the annual sessions of the RAS, I think it was 6-7 years ago, to chair a session on ancient irrigation systems. And then, yeah, you remember the encounter. And then the guys who were present in the archaeology department guys, I think I can remember, whole afternoon, 20 minutes each, I think at least 15 papers was there. And then I said afterwards or during the session that we can come together with people in the irrigation department who know how to do calculations on how much water flowed, etc. And all these people said, no, in our courses, we know about ancient irrigation systems. So major problem, you mentioned two of our former presidents in the 19th century and early 20th century, this guy, okay, who did this. They tried to take a whole view. Unfortunately, today, our knowledge is fragmented, not only in the institution, but even in SLAs. And even in archaeology, there are so many groups I attend most of them, who are talking, some of them are utter nonsense, and that is because we don't interact with each other. So I hope we can form a platform, as the chair of this session said, to create a common platform. One other small thing that Rajangini, the Kashmir document of the 10th century, I think there's a misunderstanding. They refer to Lanka, and which is a contentious issue. In Kashmir, in the 13th century, there were 2 monks and a nun from Sri Lanka who contributed to the Tibetan Tripitaka. So there's a lot of area that we can explore, if you all come together.
Dr. Susanta?
Yeah, finished, yeah.
Okay.
Main message is we must come together, different disciplines. Now there are people, unfortunately, at the PJR or ICOMOS, there was an engineer with an engineering background. I was once an engineer. And he was talking about the Ravana period. There is no Ravana period. That was
Ah.
invented in the
Mm.
early 20th century.
Okay,
Yeah.
Dr. Susanthas, now it's, I think,
Yeah,
out of
you want
our
you want me to
topics.
answer? Yeah.
Yes, okay, thank you. And now there's Mr. Palita Vanchanayaka is asking that he want to ask question on Katasarova. That okay, it's your time.
Yes.
If you,
Yeah. Bhadra, congratulations for your excellent presentation and well informed with lot of information. I
you.
speak from Sydney.
Yes.
So my question is about whether you have come across this Katasarova in the village tanks. Is it widely being used at the present moment, Bhadra?
No, Mr. Manchanayaka, it is not being used now. I have seen one in Putlam area once, that is long ago, but it is not being used as far as I know, actually, since we are not working much on small village irrigation schemes. I'm not aware, but actually most of these were replaced by cement concrete sluices. Yeah.
So the same principle is being utilized these days, or because I am
No.
more concerned of the particular invention, as such.
Yeah, actually, it is not being the technology is not being used now because it's a cumbersome operation procedure. Now it is fixing a gate and moving it up and down is more easy. I mean, because with the I know you know that most of the farmers now are part-time farmers. They can't they don't have time. So that is another reason. Yes.
Okay. So you have only come across one or two in Putlam area. That's all.
Yeah, that's all. Yeah, but there may be many, but that is only my.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you,
Mr. Prasad. Okay, this is your chance.
Yes. No, actually, thank you. First of all, thank you very much for the presentation. Then regarding this, our engineers going to other countries, once Dr. Roland Silla told us that when he went to Iran, he saw a magazine having similar to our irrigation systems. Then he has asked the people there, and they have told him it's in Kashmir. Now this Kashmir is not in India, but in Iran. He had gone to that place after that. So I think Professor Chandana Vitanachi also wanted to tell the same thing, I suppose, because he was also there at that meeting. So I think we have to look into that matter and study about those systems also. I think where that Kashmir is not Indian Kashmir, because you can't have irrigation schemes there. It's a hilly area, and this is the area similar to Sri Lanka, he said.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Vitanachi with us. Professor Chandana, I think you are, please go ahead.
Actually, unmuted, I tried several times. Actually, Mr. Prasad Fonseca said it's correct. Dr. Roland Silla mentioned that place. Actually, this Kashmir, Indian Kashmir is a very wet area. No need irrigation system, but that place, Iranian areas need this. Actually, it's very similar in Sri Lanka and Raisun and that landscape. I would like to ask you, Dr. Kamaldas, what is giant canals concept? Your other concept? Actually, I know it's a natural, very close to natural. What's
Dr. Chandana, actually
I would like to ask you what is the concept of the made by giant canals? system in Sri Lanka?
Yeah, now
So many giant canals in Sri Lanka.
that is taking water from one basin to another one. So that means crossing a ridge. That is the beauty of that. I mean, in other canals, in other systems, it is only within the one river basin, and this transbasin canals means it crosses a ridge in between, maybe one or two ridges to reach the other river basin. So it is a huge task. Nowadays, we are constructing tunnels to pass the ridge. But otherwise, the canal design is more or less similar as other canals. I mean, I don't know whether I have answered the one correctly to clarify your question.
But ancient Yoda Atlas made by one bund. No, both side build their bunds.
Yeah, there are a lot of reasons for that actually, because it absorbs the water that crosses when a canal crosses a river basin. There are many tributaries that will flow into the canal, right? So to absorb that water, it should be made as a single bank canal. Then the upstream section will become a water retaining section. So that is very common. I mean, when you take Minipe Canal, it's a very and also Alahara Canal, you can see a lot of places where these it's a single bank canals, and where the inflow from the tributaries were intercepted with the canal, and then how it was actually the absorbing that water, and during a heavy storm, the flood period to release them is a real task. So these were addressed very clearly in those systems.
Actually, Yodala canals like extended tanks.
Yeah, extended tanks means that is the reason, exact reason why I tell that the extended tanks means where the inflows join the main that canal, it forms a small lake.
Yeah.
So we call it in balancing tanks. In our current technology, we call it balancing tanks, and there are a lot of technological terms, I mean, considerations in managing the balancing tanks. It is not like a normal reservoir. The balancing tanks need special care when considering the managing of the transbasin canals.
Okay, thank you very much, madam. I think now
thank you very much.
Yeah, we have taken a little anyway, past 7 now. Yeah, no, not more time actually. I think all are here now. Still that we have more than 125 participants. I think all are very interested on to see and to hear and to know that what is our history. So, madam, now I think we have gathered previously kind of a small team to see that where we have to go. So I think you have a dream. So would you please explain about it, and let's talk about the way forward after this series of sessions.
Yes, Madhuri, I think Dr. Laksiri explained our concept behind our gathering. I mean, the collaborative work. Actually, I can see, as Dr. Susantha Gunatilaka mentioned, there are many entities at the moment. I mean, having a lot of started initiatives towards collecting information and disseminating and gathering information and things like that, more than the official work that is going on in the archaeological department. So here we are not going to duplicate any work of these organizations. We respect their roles. What we want to do here is to intervene as engineers. As again, I want to mention Dr. Susantha Gunatilaka's talk. He was talking about the engineers' participation which is very much needed in exploring the ancient irrigation structures. So definitely through water, through Water Forum of Institution of Engineers and SLAS and any other organizations that we are going to get into our board, like National Science Foundation and places like that, they would definitely come with their scientific background. As mentioned earlier also, we need to have scientifically proven literature to be forwarded to the international community. Otherwise, our myths or just the customs, these things, the stories will not be accepted, validated. That is our main aim for us to collect those information as much as possible and combine with the archaeological and engineering aspects together, like we have done in Kudavilachya. So I hope I elaborated sufficiently.
Yes, yes, madam. I think that now it's Dr. Chandana Jayawardena from the Open Institute of Sri Lanka. He teaches many students, not only the Open University, but to the Sri Jayawardena University, the Faculty of Engineering, the history of technology. Dr. Chandana, I'd like to get your idea that how we can expand this forum. Oh, I hope that you have ideas. Dr. Chandana, are you unmuted? Probably. Can somebody, I couldn't find where you are. If you raise hand, then. Dr. Chandana?
Hello?
Yeah, Chandra, please go ahead.
Fine, okay. I was unmuted. I was muted actually. Now it's okay. Thank you very much, Professor Banduni, and thank you very much, Madam.
Thank you.
And actually, Dr. Laksiri as well as Engineer Kamaladas mentioned, I think a basic framework for this work for way forward. Like, so basically, just to summarize, it could be through a collaborative project work with multidisciplinary participation and with objectives of identifying historical sources and exchanging information, formulating proper databases, and proposing mechanisms for conservation. So these type of activities we have to look into, and such objectives and activities could be either short-term or long-term, so that we can prioritize the activities and what's to be done immediately and what could be done after accomplishing those activities. And also the resource allocation, maybe from human resources as well as the funding. And importantly, finding should be published, as I mentioned, locally as well as internationally, so that the interested parties can reach the information we are finding here. And finally, it should be the result-oriented approach we have to look into. So I think the points mentioned by Dr. Laksiri as well as Madam are very much relevant in streamlining such work in this particular approach. One point I need to highlight is these historical sources, because as we see that today what we understand as our ancient irrigation heritage or ancient irrigation system is something modified, either modified by Dutch, either modified by British, or either modified by our own engineers in Sri Lanka. So, but in order to understand what could have been there originally, I think it's very important to go to the original sources, maybe the archives made by Dutch, archives made by British, and our own literature, starting from 5th century Common Era. basically this Buddhist literature, and thereafter this medieval literature of volumes and volumes we are having today. So going through these literature as well as the plans developed by the British and the Dutch and our own engineers. So there are a lot of information embodied there. So I think the references to these type of historical sources is very much important in this type of a project, so that we can identify what would have been at the original status. So that's what I understand from the discussion took place today, Professor Banduni. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Chandana Jayawardena. And I hope that now we are coming the end of our session with the very inspiring talk from our Madam Bhadra Kamaladasa. Madam, thank you very much once again. So anyway, as a customary, that I'm handing over to our Secretary of Institution of Environmental Professionals Sri Lanka, Mr. Ajit Athugala, to deliver the vote of thanks. Thank you very much. Mr. Athugala, over to you.
Hello, can you hear me? Thank you very much, Professor Banduni, giving me this opportunity to vote of thanking of this second episode of the series of events we are organizing jointly. I think we had a fruitful nearly 5:30 to 7 and enhance our knowledge on our ancient water engineering practices of Sri Lanka. Thank you very much, Engineer Bhadra Kamaladasa, for sharing us your inspiring knowledge, especially on the mysteries of ancient Sri Lankan water engineering. Thank you very much, madam, and wish you a long, healthy life to serve the motherland by sharing your knowledge and active actions. We would like to express our sincere gratitude to Dr. Kamal Laksiri and the Water Forum of the Institution of Engineering for initiating this series of episodes on ancient technologies from our history. We, the partners of the event, including Institute of Environmental Professionals Sri Lanka, IEPSL, National Science Foundation, NSF, and Sri Lanka Association of the Advancement of Science, together with the Water Forum of the Institution of Engineers of Sri Lanka, jointly put our hand together to organize this series of episodes by having an idea to where the interested parties, bridging the gap of knowledge among them and blending the ancient technologies with the modern scientific practices. Thank you very much, the presidents, chairpersons, and the members of all these organizations collaboratively joining with Institution of Engineering of Sri Lanka to bring this second episode of the series success. And I would like to express our sincere thanks to technical team of IESL and the media partners and all for their for their help behind the screen. Last but not least, I would like to express my sincere thanks to our moderator, Professor Banduni Atapattu, and all the participants for their active participation. Thank you very much. Good night all. Thank you.